Welcome to Norwegian Spitfire Foundation. This is NSF Talks.
Hello and welcome to NSF Talks. NSF Talks is a series to dive deeper than ever before into the complexity of Norwegian Spitfire Foundation, our mission, and the various people that are involved in helping us achieve our goals. And that is to acquire, restore, operate, and maintain Spitfires. It's been a long time since our last podcast. My name is Knut Åshammer, and with me is Tor Idar Larsen. And we have been having these podcasts quite a few times now, where we are, as said in the introduction, talking about the various activities that our foundation do. And one of them is also to talk about history and individuals that are important to understand the context of the air war, both in Norway and later when they were fighting abroad. And today we are going to talk about the invasion of Norway, 9th of April 1940, and as it's today is only a few days from the historical date itself, we thought it quite fitting to talk about it right now. With me I have Tor Idar Larsen, and he has gathered a lot of stories of these 7 pilots who were on this fateful day writing history with their actions. Yep. So I can introduce you to Tor Idar Larsen, and welcome to NSF Talks.
Well, thank you. It's been a while. I think the last one we had was in December. We were talking about Finn Torsager.
Yes,
something along those lines.
Just before New Year's Eve, we talked about Finn Torsager, and once again, Finn Torsager is central in this podcast as well.
Yeah, so you could say that this was part of our plan all along to first talk about Finn Torsager, and because we did speak a little bit about Fornebu and 9th of April 1940, but it's such a vast subject. So I think back then we moved on to his time with 331 and 332 Squadron. So now we will be talking about these events that happened, especially around the Oslo area and the main airfield at the time, which was Fornebu.
Yes. Yeah. And I would like to just start immediately with an important a suggestion for everyone who is listening and who wants to know more about the full context of the Norwegian effort. Tor Idar did about a year ago have a presentation for the Military Aviation Museum in Virginia, and there he goes more in depth of the entire effort from the beginning with 9th of April to the end of the war. So I highly recommend you to read and view that presentation. It's on YouTube, and we will provide you the link to that so you can enjoy this full context of the Norwegian effort during the Second World War, of the aircrew and the ground personnel.
Yes. Good. That's a good point. And since you're on, referring to podcasts and so on, I'll also refer to Cato Guhnfeldt's book about Fornebu on the 9th of April 1940, which is a massive work and one of those books that have influenced me greatly, because I was reading it when I was a teenager and stuff like that. So a lot of this comes from that book, and it's highly recommended, just as a side note.
Yeah, absolutely. This Cato Guhnfeldt is sort of like the he has established a lot of very important groundwork for understanding the full context of of the war in a sort of day-to-day basis through, in this example with the book 9th of April at Fornebu, it's sort of minute by minute almost, where you have the weeks prior to the invasion, and then the hours, and then the minutes, and then the reports. So it's very in depth. And then he continues again with the Norwegian fighter squadrons abroad, and telling it day by day. So I absolutely recommend you to look up Cato Guhnfeldt's books about the Norwegian pilots. We will move on to the subject of today, which is the 9th of April. You could say that it has a similarity to the Battle of Britain's few, the fighter pilots who defended Britain against an overwhelming invasion. Wouldn't you say that the situation on the 9th of April is very similar?
Yes, at that time, at that day, there are some similarities, and when I started to put these stories online, I really wanted to draw that line between the Battle of Britain and the few, and Norway's few, and they are quite few, and everything happened. Well, I know that there were other incidents in the air elsewhere, but it's these gladiators, these Gloucester gladiators, and those few pilots that have drawn my attention, and I'm sure others as well. So yeah, I wanted it to be like that. So these are our few, to use an English expression, in terms of Battle of Britain.
Yeah, and it's also it has many similarities, and then it also has some very how do you say, unique features that Norway has never been at war with another nation in terms of no how you say, offensives, no fighting abroad. We had a small scrap with the Swedes, during our fight for independence, but this is the first time we've been invaded, and how does a people prepare for it? How were these pilots? Were they aware of the situation and what was going to happen and how things were unfolding? Since we're looking at this in hindsight in history, what was their view of the world at that time? Do you have any recollections of that in your sources?
Well, I would say that they were aware of what was going on in the 30s. However, the political situation, spoke of a different story, because you can only look at the Gloucester Gladiator and you can tell that this is an outdated aircraft. And you can look at the other aircraft that we had at the time, the Fokker and those Italian aircraft, and you can tell that defense and military equipment and wasn't on anyone's agenda until it was too late. But yet I think they weren't like unaware, because you have Finn Torshager, and he read newspapers and aviation magazines, and so they had sort of a clue. Whether or not they expected to be invaded, I don't know. But I'm sure as time progressed and we were going into 1938 and 39, I'm sure they expected something to happen. But in naivety, I would say that I think they expected us to remain neutral, like in World War I, because you sort of look to the past to find any similarities, and how when you're in a new situation and then you look to the past and you say, okay, we were neutral back then, and I'm sure that they will leave us alone this time as well. And so
you're hoping for the best, So I mean, that was obviously I don't intend to go into detail about the politics, but that was the hope that you could stay neutral by sticking to neutrality. So if we don't involve ourselves in anything, we will stay out of trouble.
Yes, and which is funny because you hear certain politicians these days, and you hear the same rhetorics. As long as we do not do anything and stay quiet, I'm sure nothing is going to happen to us. And it's been tried and tested, and it didn't work back in 1940. And so they military-wise they were unprepared. I would say they were vastly unprepared, but so was like France, and so was almost Britain as well.
They were unprepared, both materially and training, and resources, as government didn't apply a lot of arming up the nation. But individually, do you know of any recollections of like practical things they did the nights or the hours before the invasion?
You had like Finn Torshager, he was in neutrality service, and you had others too. These people who had been through Hærens Flyskole, and maybe during the 30s, and maybe they've gone to something else like college or university and stuff like that. And but they were called back in 1939 or very early 1940 to serve neutrality, and they flying reconnaissance and but it wasn't that easy to keep these Gladiators flying because they cost money, and there were serviceable issues, and but they did try to keep somewhat of a force in the air during that winter, because the war was getting awfully close, even though people being naive didn't really think, but they were trying their best, and they had these pilots living out at Fornebu in quite sparse conditions. They were using these how do you say it in English?
They had these tents, didn't they?
Yeah, and they used this, when you sort of grow plants and tomatoes and stuff inside during the winter, and do we call it drivhus?
Greenhouses.
Greenhouses, sorry, yes. So
yes.
they were sort of using these ill-equipped and horrible places to to be a military force, which is like, it's insane.
Well, it's almost a repetition of what happened on the continent as they went through to Belgium and France, living in these tents in the dampness and everything. That wasn't very good either. So no, that's a small detail that probably many people tend to forget, is the living conditions of an air base in war is very bad often, since nothing is established.
Yeah, it was bad, and Fornebu was actually an airfield, and you would think that they would have proper living quarters for a small group of fighter pilots trying to defend Norway, but apparently they didn't. There is more to this, which I will talk about in a while, but. Should we just try to set like the stage here, Knut, for the evening of 8th of April, midnight and early hours in the morning of 9th of April, and because that's like from midnight until the morning of 9th of April. That's what we're gonna mainly be talking about.
That's so we've basically talked about the foreplay here, where they know something's going to happen. They don't know if they're going to be involved, if the country is going to be neutral or not. So they're doing their best with the small equipment they have, the limited resources they have. They do reconnaissance flights, and their job is to maintain neutrality in the air, which basically means to stop any unknown aircraft intruding into the airspace.
Exactly, which isn't that easy, because during that winter there were more and more reconnaissance aircraft of unknown origin flying over Oslo. They heard them, they just weren't able to catch them.
Yes.
So there were signs of things to come.
Yes, and that we can definitely continue then with the night of 8th of April. So coming to the morning of 9th of April, things started to happen.
Yeah, just as a curiosity, like because these are things that when I read the book Cato did, sort of like stuck to my mind, and there was an air attaché from Germany. His name was Eberhard Spiller, and he lived just outside the airport. And it's quite sneaky, but I'm sure it's allowed, but it's really sneaky to, on the 8th of April, trying to invite top brass of the Norwegian Army Air Force for dinner and drinking,
getting them drunk.
to keep them occupied while Germany is launching an attack force.
It's basically conspiring against the nation you're attached to. So
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been suspicious for the air army staff as well, or army air staff.
Many of them said no to this invitation. Some of them, went, and one of them was fighter pilot Odd Bull, funny name in English, but he was there, and he did notice.
Bull.
Yeah. He noticed that Spiller was often called to the back rooms to talk to Berlin, which he found a bit, odd.
Yes.
And I think he left before midnight. So there were some top brass present there. But the cheekiness of doing something like that is because he was supposed to meet paratroopers coming into Oslo in the morning, which didn't happen. But that was his job, just to keep them occupied and then meet an invading force at Fornebu.
Yeah, that's very cheeky. It's like trying to welcome to Norway with the welcoming party, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah, very cheeky. So
here are the keys for the airport.
Here's the keys, and I've been living here for quite some time, and good luck, chaps. Just to set the stage a little bit further, when night fell and a fog started to, it was quite snowy back then as well. So because most of the time around April, around Oslo or in your parts are there's no snow. It's already gone. But you can clearly tell from any picture from the early days of April that it was actually quite a bit of snow around Fornebu and Oslo at that time. So there was snow on the ground, and a fog came in from the Oslo fjord and covered Fornebu during the night. So when things started to happen, there were some fog going around. I do think that the first air alarms started to go on around just after midnight. And so they were like, I think that Finn and a few others, they slept at the restaurant at Fornebu because there was like an airfield restaurant. So that's where they slept.
Yeah,
so
while on duty.
And so they were on duty and they were waiting for whatever to happen.
Yeah. No, that sets the stage. A low incoming mist. It's sort of foreboding, foreshadowing, and what's going to happen.
Because during those early hours, and I know that they were awakened from their sleep around 1 a.m. And they heard some unknown engine sounds from the air, and they had spread out all the Gladiators around the airport in case of a bomb attack, and there were already messages coming in from the Oslo fjord's outer positions that an unknown enemy were intruding. And specifically, I remember this mysterious phone call to one of these huts outside the perimeter of Fornebu. Someone called with a Swedish voice saying that there were forces going north, and I think the guy
they passed Malmö, wasn't it, or something?
So and the guy took that call and he was like, "How did you get my number?"
Yeah. No, it is it is surprising when the Swedes are obviously able to inform military quicker than their own staff.
Yes, it's peculiar. It's quite peculiar, how things work, and which sort of just strengthens our point that they were vastly unprepared for what was going on. The most modern air force in the world were coming, and they, got messages from Sweden.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that knowing how unprepared or how unequal the fight is going to become. It makes it even more memorable to what they were able to do and their actions.
Yes, because this is like a 1 against 10 sort of situation in outdated aircraft against top modern aircraft.
Top trained pilots who had
top
lots
trained
of time.
pilot. Oh yes, coming because these German pilots, they had experience from Spain, and they had like ME 110s, and they had Heinkel 111s, and we had pre-war Gloucester Gladiator.
They could barely keep up in level flights with anything.
Exactly, they could barely keep up in level flight with a Heinkel. So God knows what they would think, but yes. Should we go straight to the first combat?
Yes, the first contact. I guess
the first contact, because we've been discussing this before, I'm sure, when we talked about Finn Torsager, because there were 2 of the Gladiators they were told to go up. I think it was around 4 a.m. in the morning. The fog was over Fornebu. Torsager went first. Arve Bråten came second, but he had some startup problems, and they put in the wrong frequency tuned in between Torsager and Bråten, so they had no contact.
So that was the ground crew who did that, you think? That they...
I don't know, probably. I don't know. Who does it? Yeah. There was like a misunderstanding about the frequency, so Torsager was sort of on his own. And he was flying over the fog when he spotted this dark aircraft somewhere ahead. It was a 2-engined aircraft with twin rudders, and I think he saw the German crosses on the wings after a while, and he realized that this was not any. This was an intruder.
And they have been preparing for this. This must have been, as we just talked in the beginning, that they must have known this could possibly happen.
Mm-hmm.
So they mentally, they still have to go ahead and do their duty and press on with the attack.
Yeah.
Must be difficult when you've never ever done something like this in your life.
No, I don't know. I'm sure he spoke about being guilty. About shooting at or attacking this unknown aircraft, because you have to know what you're doing, because what if you're shooting someone you're not supposed to shoot?
Maybe it is an aircraft that was just coming astray into Norwegian airspace. Maybe it didn't have a ill intent, but you don't know, and you still have to make a decision.
Yeah, and he thankfully made the right decision in opening fire, but I don't know. It must have been something to decide in a split second, because you just have to go for it, and he did. So he went in for an attack, and I think he opened fire on just a little bit too far out. He didn't get close enough, and you're inexperienced, and you don't wait long enough until you fire. We experience this when we fly simulations. We do not. You have to wait until you fire.
We always start a mile away, and then after maybe 2 or 3 years of playing, you finally get down to 150 yards if you're very lucky.
Right, exactly. And he did the same mistake. He fired from way out. So there were no, but they did notice that he was firing. These Germans, they noticed him, so they just went under the cover of fog, and then, but they didn't really know where they were. For what they knew, they could crash into a mountain if they just kept on flying in the blind, so they had to go up again. And when they went up, he went down for another attack, and so on. It went for like 3 times, I think.
Yes. And do you have, this was a single lone aircraft, so so that sounds for me that's almost like a forward scout, if I remember correctly. And this is someone has written this, I think Cato did, that there was a scout attachment just to check the conditions, the weather conditions. Is it possible to land at Fornebu, or do we have to parachute? And this decision was eventually made to land. So this was probably a scout plane.
Most likely a scout to check out the conditions. And since there were aircraft in the air around 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. or something, you had like German aircraft flying over to check on the conditions. So yeah, that it was a scout. I'm sure it was a scout. So yeah, you're right about that.
So he returned to Fornebu and basically announced to everyone that Norway is at war, in the terms of, we don't know. Do you know if he knew it was German? But at least you knew that neutrality had been broken.
Yes, neutrality had been broken, and I have a feeling, this is just speculation, but I have a feeling that he knew it was German. But there was also some talk about a bullet hole in his Gladiator. So he might have been shot upon by this intruder as well. So, but he knew that this was some serious stuff when he came back to Fornebu from his first flight, and that was the first time someone opened fire in the air, in hostility.
Yeah, first time ever in Norwegian history they fire in anger in the air.
Yep, exactly.
Of course, that maybe that was going through his mind at that moment, but you have to move on quickly, and things was probably a rush. Then what happened next? What did the command do next at Fornebu?
Well, they were starting to get messages that 15 aircraft or more had been spotted passing Malmö off the coast of Sweden going north. But Captain Erling Muntedal, he was he station commander at Fornebu, or he was in command of the? Well, he had some important position at Fornebu, at least.
Yeah.
And he was not quite convinced that these aircraft were going to Oslo, but he thankfully decided to send the Gladiators up just in case. So, and then he told, it was actually Rolf Torbjørn Tradin who was leading these Gladiators going up in the air, and he brought 5 others. No, he was one of the 5s.
Yes, and what this was all they could manage, right? They didn't have any more aircraft that was ready. They had 2 more aircraft that was not ready at the time. So they sent up everything they had, which was 5 aircraft.
So these are the guys we're talking about. This is Tradin, it's Per Våler, it's Finn Torshager, Christian Fredrik Schyn, and Dag Krohn. But left behind is Arve Bråten, because he was waiting for his Gladiator to be ready for another sortie, because he was back on the ground. And then you had a 7th pilot, Oskar Albert Lutgen, who was also waiting for his Gladiator to be ready. So
in total 7 pilots ready for battle.
You had 7 pilots ready for battle, 5 in the air in a V-shaped formation going south, and then you had 2 ready to take off.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and that is what they're going to face, an invading armada of, initially it was something like 50 or 60 aircraft in the first wave.
Yeah, there was a lot more than 15. They were reported.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there was a lot more, because they got a report of 15, but there were like 50 to 60. There was it's a whole armada of German aircraft coming their way, which was a batch of Heinkels and Messerschmitts 110s and some transport craft. But no Messerschmitt 109s, because the range sort of.
Yeah. That site must have I wonder what they thought, if their stomach dropped and their sort of heart raced up into their chest when they realized that all of that is hostile.
All of that is hostile, and they understood it because they, I think Tradin got his order that an attack by an air force was expected against Oslo while it was in the air. They were told to patrol over Nesoddlandet. They were circling, and then this German armada showed up. Underneath them, they appeared. And from what I understand, talking to them and reading, they just gave up counting them. There were so many of them.
Yeah, and that's probably why Tradin said that famous words for us who are into this history is every man for himself, good luck.
Yeah, every man's for himself and good luck.
So there is no point trying to attack individual aircraft or try and organize something. We are a few gladiators versus an army. So we have to do the best we can in this moment.
So just find a target and fire. That's it. Just find a target and do what you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have Arve Bråten, which he was a bit delayed, and he made this also quite famous remark to his ground crew. I don't know if you know it.
Yes, I read it. Very understated.
Yeah. You go ahead. You can do it. You can.
Oh yeah. No, he since he was delayed and he saw all the orders go off. I'm pretty sure he had some time to think about. He had some more time to sort of dwell on what is about to happen. So he pointed at his car and said, "If anyone wants my car, it's over there."
Yeah, that sort of means that he realized that what was going on. He understood, because if he thought that they were just going on a reconnaissance sortie, that's not something you would tell your ground crew. I would assume at least that maybe this was because he knew that something very bad was going to happen.
Yeah. No, it's a very good statement of the time, of the situation and the mindset they were in at that time.
Exactly. So we can talk a little bit about each pilot's experience during that melee over Oslo.
Yeah, I guess we can begin just for chronological reasons. We can begin with the leader. So Rolf Torbjørn Tradin, he led the formation of 5. He ordered everyone to attack on their own and wish them good luck. So how did it go for Tradin?
He went in for several attacks. But he experienced that, when he went in for an attack, they just went for the clouds, the Germans. So
yes, and the clouds were below them, right?
They were below them.
Yep. They were flying above the clouds because low mist, and we know this in Norway. There's always a lot of low mist in springtime and wintertime. So they just flew into the mist in cover. Yeah.
But he went in for several attacks, and he remarked that he felt it was quite easy to get away from any fire at him because they were firing with tracers. So he just felt he could turn away from the attacks quite easily.
Do you think that there was some reluctancy on the German side as well to attack, to return fire to the Norwegians when they saw they were coming in these ancient devices, ancient aircraft?
Considering what they had been told, because I think some of them or all of them had been told that they were sort of just coming to protect us from the British. It's all propaganda. So I think that some of them were quite surprised when they were met by 5 outdated British Gloster Gladiators just going for it. Yes, because I don't think they were prepared for. And I think some of these German, I'm not sure if the pilots, but some of the soldiers were saying like, why are you firing at us? Because
exactly.
Yeah, we come to. They were told they would come to. Like I said, it's all propaganda.
Yeah, they were told that this was a liberation campaign.
Yeah,
to save us from the British, which were going to invade us. Or
at some point, I'm sure they would be trying to secure the some of the natural resources that we had. But so they were going for that sort of propaganda, and then everyone bought it. So. But that was Stradin, and he after a while his machine gun malfunctioned, so he had to abort the fight, and he landed at Steinsfjord. I'm not quite sure where that is, but I'm sure it's somewhere in the vicinity of Oslo. Do you know where it is?
No, not at the top of my mind. The reason he didn't go back to Fornebu was that the Germans had already started attacking the airfield, didn't they?
Because some of them were told to not come to Fornebu and do not land, because as we're going into some of these other pilots, you will understand that one of the Gladiators will be shot up. I think that's.
I guess we can go straight to him.
Oh yeah.
So Per Wåler, he has quite remarkable. He was interviewed by documentary, several documentaries, so where he talks about his encounter. So it's very interesting. He closed in as close as he could. So as Finn Torshager did, or as in the beginning, he opened up very far away, and perhaps he was discussing with the other crew, with the other pilots. And Per, he waited to open fire until he was like could see the entire cockpit or entire windscreen just covered with the entire aircraft. So like 150 meters or 200 yards or so, and then closed in all the way into 50 yards, and then that aircraft the wing engine just burst into flame, and it spiraled down and crashed into the ocean, into the Oslo fjord. So that must have been quite spectacular to be that close, and sort of war comes to you suddenly very personal. And Per wasn't really like a fighting guy, like an aggressive guy. He wanted to study, was it social economics, and he had a high academic background. I don't really think he was like a aggressive fighter person.
No, I met Per Wåler, and he did not strike me as a very aggressive kind of guy. But I don't think any of them, were. No, but it's just like you say. He waited, and he fired very close, and he more than likely got that Heinkel. And yes. He went to Fornebu. And he landed his Gladiator, and he wanted to keep the engine running, just to rearm and refuel and go back up. But then you had several 110s coming in over the airport, so he had to run away from his Gladiator. And about 20 meters behind him, he heard projectiles hitting the ground, and the Gladiator was set on fire.
That is very close call, since
that is very close.
I mean, as a pilot, but not in any way similar to a Gladiator. Since I'm a pilot, I only have an easy harness to get off, but he has a harness over his shoulders, needs to get all the straps off, he needs to open the cockpit, needs to climb out. It's very tall, it's very impractical, and needs to crawl down and get away. All that in 10 seconds or something? He got away. That was very, very fortunate.
Yeah, I think Per he was very lucky at that point. But he did, very well during this brief encounter with German forces. And then you have Dag Krohn. He also went in for an attack. He said he saw one of them on a Heinkel go vertically just straight down just south of Fornebu. But when he tried to follow it, he was attacked by two Me-110s.
Yeah, it's very interesting. He saw them, or I mean, he tried to follow the one he shot at. And then he got attacked by another pair of 110s, and it's almost all of these Gladiator pilots. They were attacked by several swarms or several pairs of 110s. So there must have been so many, all of you, left, right, up, down, center. I mean, the chaos must have been total. There was no way of have any unit cohesion. There's no way that these gladiators could have cooperated in any way, since there's too many enemy aircraft around you to keep a lookout for. So chaos.
Yeah, so you can go in for an attack, and then you get 3 others on you, and you have to abort your attack, and you can find another to attack, and then you get 3 or 4 more on your tail, and so it goes. You're just so outnumbered. But he made some remarks later on that he had attacked a Heinkel, and I think he must have thought or felt that he had injured or killed one of the machine gunners, because the machine gun suddenly went quiet and pointing upwards. So maybe he was just hiding in that, in that Heinkel, but maybe he was, killed.
And he pressed on the attack on that Heinkel that lost the rear gunner, and spend all his ammunition, or at least did everything he could on that aircraft, and then that aircraft disappeared into the mist again, descending, spiraling, and you don't see it anymore. You don't want to go down into that mist, since the ground is right below you.
Yeah, right. So he also landed at Steinsfjord just after that battle. And then we've talked about 3. There's more to come. We talked about Finn last time. He was a bit unlucky during this second encounter of his, because his guns froze. They got jammed. But he had gained some experience, so he did wait a little bit longer before he opened fire, and he did see some black smoke coming out of the bomber's engine, but it also disappeared into the clouds. So so that was it.
It's just as we said, we have as we said, there are the superiority of the German aircraft in numbers and speed, and also the weather is sort of working against defense, because they can just fly into mist and escape, and it's everything happens very quickly.
Exactly. So in all that confusion and his guns jamming, and so he decides to go back to Fornebu to fix the problem. But when he came back there were several fires on the ground, because I'm sure Per Waller had already landed, and then 2 Messerschmitt 110s attacked him from the rear. So he got away. Luckily, got away from his attackers and set course for Kjeller, which is to the north. But at Kjeller, there was more of the same, fire and chaos on the ground. So he turned around, tried to fly back to Fornebu, but that was unsafe. So he decided to land his Gladiator at Mjærvann in Enebakk, and that was it for that Gladiator.
I guess it's also worth to mention that I don't know on top of my head what the endurance is of the Gladiator, but I cannot expect it to be any more than 1 hour and a half, maybe 1 hour 20 minutes. So they spend half an hour flying south, and they've been fighting, and then they spent maybe 20 minutes to come back up to Fornebu, and then 10 minutes more to Kjeller. So maybe at best they have 20 half an hour minutes of fuel left. What are you going to do? You have to land somewhere.
Yeah, what are you going to do? And when there's no runways to use anymore, and there's 2 airfields around, like, what are you going to do? Thank God for some frozen lakes to put your aircraft down, which is what he did. So for Finn's sake, that was it for 9th of April 1940. The conditions at that lake wasn't the best, so he managed to taxi his Gladiator to the shoreline, and I think he took the bus back.
Yeah, that is also I'll come back to it, but I would like to know what these pilots did after they landed, since fortunately they all survived. But it is sort of bizarre to think what they had to do after the fight, since things are so bizarre then. We talked about Finn now. Christian Fredrik Skie, he has probably the most exciting, if you could say, but at least the most difficult fight.
That was very dramatic stuff. he came very close to die. Because like the rest, he went into the fight over Nesoddlandet. He attacked several of them while he kept an eye out, and he felt like he had some poor visibility in his cockpit, and he went lower and he pumped up fuel to the windscreen to clear his vision, and he managed to create some better sight for him, and he spotted 110s. He half rolled it downwards to those Germans, and he opened fire, and he kept firing. I'm sure he opened fire just a tad too early to get some good results, but he shot one down, one of those Me-110s. So that aircraft rolled over and spiraled down, and
it's pretty impressive to think that he is. I mean, his situation is pretty difficult since already he has low visibility in his cockpit, so that creates a high workload and high amount of stress. He tries to clean his vision, and he descends, and when he finally gets vision again, he sees he's got two 110s behind him. So he has to do something very quickly now, and he just cuts the throttle and rolls over and dives straight down and gets on the tail of one of them and shoots it down. Yeah. Almost from a vertical attack. I mean, you don't train for this. Everything happens extremely quickly, and you don't see anything in a Gladiator. That big wing is in the way, so he had to improvise very quickly.
But how many Gladiators managed to shoot down Messerschmitt 110s?
Yeah,
that's skill in its own.
Yeah,
you have this this Gladiator, and you're going in for a really modern Messerschmitt 110, and you manage to shoot it down.
Yeah, and the only way you can do it is to surprise. If you surprise, you have to be the one first to attack.
Yep.
And managed to do it, and it spiraled away. But of course, there was his friend, his wingman was there, and he was now on him.
Yeah, and there were more. There were more Germans coming in.
More coming in too.
More coming in. So and then he was attacked from the rear, and he is hit. He's hit in his arm. So he sort of loses just his. He can't move his arm anymore. He can't use his arm to do anything. It's just the arm is completely dead from the impact by these bullets. So he's bleeding, and he contemplates jumping out. And now he's in real trouble because he's injured, and he's got a Messerschmitt 110 on his back. So he's trying also to land his Gladiator at a frozen lake. But when you approach the lake, you sort of need both hands, both arms to do stuff.
Yeah, you need to reduce throttle, you need to lower flaps, you need to work with the left hand. Everything's on your left hand, and no, it's numb. It's useless to you.
Yep. So he overshot. He overshot that, and he crash landed in a field close by. So he's still in the cockpit, and when the Gladiator come to a halt, and the engine starts to smoke, and but he managed to pull himself out of the aircraft
with one hand, or one arm.
With one hand, So he's injured, but thankfully he survived the attack. Yeah. And there is a photo, and I think I'm going to post it on the Facebook page during this month. But you can see him in front of the Gladiator with his arm, in bandages, and standing in front of it. So because he was back into civilian clothes.
Yeah, again, the absurdity of suddenly he's there, then under occupation, if I remember correctly. So back in civilian clothes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
We have there is one left though. Who we can do Oscar Albert Lutgen first, because he had to turn back due to a bad engine, and he got a flat tire on landing, and then it was attacked. So that was quite botched for him.
Yeah, he was not able to make any contact with the enemy, and he had to just return to the field straight away, and when he did so, his aircraft got attacked. But do we know anything about what was he in around the aircraft, or was he trying to get a new aircraft? Since, if I remember correctly, there were no other Gladiators that were prepared.
Nothing was left to do for him. So. Yeah. And I honestly, on top of my head, not sure what happened after he left his Gladiator. But then you also have Arve Bråten, and his Gladiator wasn't working well either. So, but he decided to press on, attacking.
And he was flying alone.
Yeah, he was flying alone.
As we said earlier, Tradin led the formation with 5, including himself, and then Bråten and Lutke was supposed to join them later. And then Lutke continued to have engine problems, so he was delayed further, but Bråten managed to go on a bit earlier. So he went into battle alone. That must have been scary too,
That was, yeah.
As we talked about earlier, he had made up his mind already. So.
Oh yeah, that must have been quite scary. He went in for an attack on a Heinkel 110. Managed to do some damage on it, but when he had to turn sharply because he was being attacked, and when he completed that turn, the German was too far away. So Bråten also landed his aircraft at a lake, because he also saw there were burning aircraft at Fornebu at that time. So he understood that was no place to be. And that was it. That was what the Gladiators managed to do. But when you come to think of it, they managed to shoot down Luftwaffe aircraft, and that's a pretty good feat.
Absolutely. Just to not have the opportunity to do, they were thrown into a situation without much possibility to do anything else. They only had these handful of aircraft, and they had a huge invasion armada in front of them, and they had no other choice but to press on the attack and do the best they could with what they had. And they were able to do that. For me, it's just with just thinking that the courage that they had is immense, and they must have just steeled themselves in. They must have come into a mental state where they will just keep all the emotions away and do as best as they can. And this probably only lasted for what this entire battle lasted for 15 minutes.
Yeah,
20
not
minutes.
that long.
10 minutes maybe.
Yeah. And with the Gladiators gone, for some odd reason, no one had the idea of, what if you put a transport of some sort in the middle of a runway? You can't land there. But what happened was that, the Germans, they were short on fuel and they started to land. And when the Heinkels and the Messerschmitts were coming into land, there were some machine guns, firing at them, Norwegian machine guns firing at these landing Luftwaffe aircraft, but they stood no chance because, some of them, crashed when they landed, but, with that amount of aircraft, they and it wasn't even supposed to be, because it was supposed to be, taken by paratroopers. So it was like alternative plans in invading a country, and so the Air Force sort of invaded Oslo because Blücher was, down in the lake. I mean, in the fjord. So
yeah, it became sort of, if I remember correctly, it was a sort of decision on the fly to land, and it caused a lot of chaos. Since there was not space for 50 Junker 52s to land on Fornebu.
Massive chaos. And so things should have gone better, but in hindsight, the pilots at least did what they could. You couldn't really expect much more of 7 Gladiators, minus 1, 6 Gladiators going into battle like that.
It really shows the spirit of their name, the fighter wing. They did their duty, regardless of the odds.
Yeah, exactly. And as time progressed, that they going back to Spiller, the cheeky air attaché, he was killed the day after, 10th of April, in the Hamar area, where the Germans were facing some resistance from Norwegian forces. So that didn't go well for him. And then you had all these pilots. I don't know exactly to the detail what they were doing in the days after the invasion and the dogfight. I know that Finn Torshager, he came down with pneumonia, so
Yes.
so he was out. He had to stay in bed because pneumonia was serious stuff back then. So he had to stay in bed until he was better again in July or August 40, and then he escaped.
Yeah. And he was taken to hospital, wasn't he?
She was taken to hospital. Let's say, no, I hadn't written anything about that, but he was taken to hospital, and he stayed. I think he stayed with the resistance for a good while before he became an instructor at Little Norway. That was on top of my mind, so I can't really say 100%. But he became a doctor after the war.
So basically, did any of these pilots fly again during the campaign, during the invasion of Norway? Did they flee anywhere to fly again?
Good question, because Dag Kron took his Gladiator to Hamar. And I think they, were planning to use that Gladiator as part of the defense, but it didn't really work out for them. But all of the other Gladiators were gone. No, they, there were some flying up north and with some Fokkers and stuff like that. But as far as I know, and I'm sure someone will correct me, there were very little flying on left for these guys at that time of the war.
Yes, and I think that ends it very well. If you would like to hear again more about what their stories, how they continued their stories, we will link the presentation Tor Idar did about the Norwegian effort of the ground crew and pilots that fought abroad, that he presented to the Aviation Museum of Virginia, where you can get the entire length of the war and get it more in context.
Because some of these guys, they fled and they fought with the Royal Air Force, including Tradin and Torshager. There's one story though I have to do, because Norwegians, they have you heard of Jantelov? You're not supposed to think you're anything special.
It's very important that you don't boast of what you do. Anything that shows achievement is frowned upon. It's basically
yes.
You have to think. You're not supposed to think outside everyone else's way of life. So if you are different, that's bad.
Yes, right. So the story goes that they had a party at Little Norway, in the early days of Little Norway, when these fighter pilots from 9th of April served as instructors. And I think this is Tradin. It could be someone else. It's definitely one of the pilots from 9th of April. And he, whoever it was, he was bragging or telling the story. At least I'm not sure if he's bragging about it, but they were drinking, and he was telling the story about his heroics of 9th of April 1940, because he had something that none of these other guys had, and that was real combat experience. So that was at the time when one of the other pilots also trained at Kjeller before the war, but he had no combat experience at that time. I think his name was Arne Austen, and I know him quite well. But the guy who wrote that story did not specify the name of the guy who did this. But I remember calculating my way forward to that this was Arne Austen. But he took, a champagne cooler, with ice. so he took that champagne cooler and he spilled that on his neck.
Yeah, poured it down his neck. Yeah.
It's a horrible practical joke, and I'm not sure if anyone they really appreciated that, but he was a bit of a practical joker like that. So you're not supposed to brag about fighting the Germans.
No. So time to cool down now.
Yeah. Time to cool down now. So
yeah.
And just to close this, Knut, this is April, and it's 9th of April soon, and there are lessons to be learned here. for the future and for the present with the Ukraine. And so what this, teaches us, or me at least, is that we have to be prepared, because they were unprepared. They should have been prepared for an invading force. They weren't, because they, naively sort of believed in peace, and which is fine. But there were signs, more than signs, in Europe in the 30s that this wasn't really going the right way. So there are, clear experience to take from a story like this, and whatever those young guys had to, do, because if they had been unlucky, they would have died in that combat. Thankfully, they also survived, but it could have gone worse, and they were so unprepared for what was coming.
Yes, I think, I mean, the parallels are, there are parallels with the situation in Ukraine, and I think that it's important that we remember the stories of these pilots, and as young people who decided to make a difference and do their duty, and in the unknown, even when they were unprepared, they decided to be steadfast and continue fighting. And they moved abroad, they traveled all across the world, they trained in little Norway, and they came back to reclaim their country again as free.
Yeah, right.
And we must not forget such stories of people. It doesn't matter if it doesn't matter that this story is old and we don't have any living veterans of this time any longer. But that's why it's even more important to remember their sacrifice and their efforts, since it doesn't come from anywhere. They have to make a decision, and they have to make a stand, and they did.
Yeah. And you say it's if long gone, and sure, it's over 80 years ago, but I've come to realize that history is closer to us than we might think, especially now with Ukraine. And you see how these Russian forces use the same sort of tactics as they did during 1945 when they were going into Berlin and going into Germany. So we've come you come far, but maybe not that far.
Yes. And another reason I think it's important also to remember this history, or try to find the truth in history, is that as these Norwegian pilots and the fighter wing is a way, as a symbol for Norway, but it's also a symbol of a democracy defending its own rights to be sovereign, to be independent.
Right.
And the aggressor, which was Nazi Germany here, but it can also be anyone, is decided that we have a better opinion of what we want this country to be, and we're going to liberate you. And all of this means that that country doesn't respect the sovereignty of another country. So it's all very important that these pilots, they decided that no, our independence is worth fighting for, and they did fight for it and continue to fight for it. And fortunately, they survived. But even if they wouldn't have, they still decided to make that choice.
Right. Yes. Because when you know what freedom is, you fight for it. I think there was another pilot who wrote something like that to his mother. I think I used it as a quote in a book.
I do not remember the name of him, but I do remember the context.
Yeah, because he said something like, "I don't care whatever happens to me as long as I have fought for freedom." I'm paraphrasing, because I have seen what oppression means. I think it was a young guy, and I think he was killed over Cambridge by a lightning strike in a Spitfire or something like that. So I think it's very well summed up what these guys were going up against. So lessons to be learned, and we're closer to history than we might think.
Absolutely.
Yes. That's it, Knut.
That is a very good way to end, and I hope everyone here have enjoyed listening to me and Tor Idar. It's been nice to go back to these, to go back in depth to read on these personal stories of these people and their actions and their decisions.
Yeah, and the question now is, what will we do next? We have to discuss that.
We can continue with the. We were going to continue with other profiles, so we could do Leif Lundsten next.
Yes, could be our favorite topic.
Yes.
Could be we're going down the path of Leif Lundsten. That would be fun.
I have to visit you and Tore soon anyway. So to get a bit more, I have to fly that Spitfire soon again. I missed that Spitfire pit very much, and I think it's a great opportunity to talk a bit about the local area where Leif Lundsten came from, and so that we create a bit of context of where he came from and how such a ordinary person became one of the most experienced Spitfire pilots that no one knows about.
Yes, exactly, which is, very fascinating. And considering everyone's, in relation to anyone where I come from, I counted down 6 generations from Leif, and I'm related to him. So I take anything I can take it. I take that.
You have to make a revision, republishing of Spitfire Glory, where you are related.
Back in the 1600s.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we better end this now, Knut. We will be uploading this in time of 9th of April. So by 9th of April, maybe on 9th of April, this will be available to all of you. So hope you enjoyed it. We enjoyed it, and we will do more.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
See you. Bye-bye.